clear focus, and I'm hoping some of you may have seen the Sugarcrete on the ground floor, the award-winning, something we're very proud of. But we also, as a centre, look at the sustainability of the economy and skills and workforce, and we also look at sustainability of our local community. So every year, this building hosts probably over 50 community events for free. Our local community come in, and that can be upskilling, it can be about food, nutrition, understanding, improving mental health. So it's a really interesting concept, but through this collaborative space, we have a number of different partners who engage with us, and they're very interested in these sorts of projects. So I hope that makes sense. My biggest advice for this building from when I started here is go for a wander. It's very interesting. The more you wander around, the more things, our robotics lab, our Sugarcrete lab, there's lots of really interesting things here, but there's lots of things hopefully for you to engage with. I just want to say that Claire very kindly sent me an overview. It sounds like a really interesting project. It's not what I do, so I'm not an expert in the things you do. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the afternoon. And yeah, feel welcome to be in the space whenever you want to.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Chris. Okay, so our programme for today will follow a series of student presentations. Joseph, do you have some students to present, or will it be you today?
At this moment, I do see one of my former students, Liz, who is here. She'll probably assist me. Liz is very reliable, and so I know she would show up. She wouldn't let me down. So, but I probably would do the bulk of the presentation because it's related to the course that I teach, which is called Concepts and Principles of Sustainability. I suppose I should introduce myself to everyone. My name is Dr. Joseph Dorsey. I am a professor of instruction here at the Patel College of Global Sustainability at the University of South Florida. I've been in this position for about 12 years. Our college is focused on basically sustainability, whether it's social, economic, or environmental. We have several concentrations such as water, energy, food, entrepreneurship, business, sustainability, climate adaptation and mitigation. I oversee our food, sustainability, and security concentration. And so what I focus on is urban agriculture. And so one of the ways that I got connected with Claire is through the this collaboration that we have with USF World and University of East London. And so we've actually worked together for a project last year where we focused on food forest and edible landscapes. And so these seminars were developed, or symposiums, were developed as a collaboration between two institutions, across the Atlantic. The thing is that we are not in sync as far as the same semesters, as far as production of work. So what I've done is had my students produce papers on a certain theme. Like last year, it was, like we said, food forest, but also material. It was actually, we expanded it to, we were looking at food systems, material ecology, and the circular economy. This year, we decided to focus on what I called the MARS project. And so Modular Adaptive Resource Systems is what MARS stands for. And so what we wanted to do for maybe every year is to have my students who are graduate students produce papers from a certain theme in the spring. And then I give the final paper and as well as the presentations to Claire Penny-Inch in the summer. And then she shares it with her students in the fall, and then you come up with some, expansion and, integration of that information within your course on, that you guys are involved in. And so the theme kind of sticks to, what we can do to deal with environmental issues and food production, so that's my emphasis is on urban agriculture because, I feel as though with climate change, we have to be concerned about how we're going to feed ourselves over the next few decades and maybe even centuries, And, from 10,000 years of agricultural history, we realized that a lot of that had to do with stable environment, stable, climate across the world. But with, the greenhouse gas effect, and affecting the climate, we see that we have droughts in places that maybe get drier, there are places to get wetter, there are places to get hotter, there's places to get colder. So, your agricultural production is not always certain. So that creates a certain insecurity. And so my feeling is that, over half the world's, more than half the world's population lives in the urban environments. So we need to start looking at how do we produce food within the cities. And so that's why my emphasis is on urban agriculture, things such as community gardens, like we said, food forests and edible landscapes, rooftop gardens, as well as shipping container farming, warehouse farming, high-rise vertical farming, hydroponics, aquaponics, all of these alternatives. Now, it's not necessarily that we will ever stop trying to have crops, out in the rural environments, but we need to be able to supplement that, and also be resilient in case we don't have, the crops that we would like, and also could provide opportunities for rewilding of the rural areas too, to bring back, some of the more natural environments. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that aspect of technology, not just here on Earth, but also in outer space too. So the idea is that, we're spending a lot of time now looking to other celestial bodies to possibly migrate, which I think is not necessarily a good thing. We should really focus on the Earth. But because we're already in that motion towards, outer space, other planets, moon, and so forth, it thought it'd be good to kind of look at what would it take to create food production to sustain us in these places. And of course, a lot of these times, these technologies that we develop to look into the off Earth can also be applied here on this planet. And so that's helped us to kind of think beyond what we see and kind of imagine new futures. And so I think that's kind of how I like to introduce myself, because I think that, sustainability is not just, you can say it's not a trend. It's more of a way of life that we must adopt as we go forward. And food is a very important component of that. It's water and energy and so forth. So I think I think I want to share a little more before we move back into letting you guys focus. I have a brief presentation. Let me reduce that and share first. I can share this. Okay, can everybody see this presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see slideshow. Let me wait a minute. There's a slideshow from the beginning. Okay. And okay, so this collaboration comes from what we're doing at University of South Florida in connecting with the East London, the University East London, and we have something called a virtual global exchange. And let's see if I can get this thing to move forward. Okay. Okay, so we have this relationship where we form in partnerships with other countries, other institutions. And so I did this presentation for this particular program or project that we have at university. So, I had to tell them, the country that we're collaborating with and the institution and the person and the course title. And this title is basically the course that you guys are involved in, Basic Advanced Tools and Principles of Design. And as I said before, the Modular Adaptive Resource System focuses on growing plants and food in human interface in isolated and controlled environments, such as off-grid autonomous growing units on Earth and the International Space Station and Moon and Mars colonies. As I said before, I have a course where students do various projects. The project that I had the students do was looking at creating teams that depend on whatever their expertise is, but to look at certain projects and skill sets and focus on what the theme of the semester is. And so this is out of my syllabus, so it's not so much something I need to read to you, but this is how I explain the project to the students through the syllabus. And so normally they wanted to know if we do icebreakers, as far as relationship between USF and UEL. And one of the things that actually Dr. Claire did last year was she spoke to my students on Teams during one class session. I would have liked to do that this semester. I don't guess we didn't really get a chance to schedule that. But one of the things is having that connection between the faculty as well as with the students. And so that's something that maybe I'll do next time we work on this. But I think the students were really excited about this collaboration between different institutions. And as I said before, the final reports that they do are sent to Claire so that she can share with you guys. And like I said, it's a collaborative project between, so like I said before, it's a global, virtual global exchange that we do here, and it helps us to have, good international relationships. And that's, like I said, culminates in this symposium in the fall, because I think it's a great way to kind of bring us back together over this theme. And, I'm hoping that we can have another theme next year. I have something in mind, but I'm not going to talk about it at the moment. Like I said, the second collaboration, and yeah, okay. So this is just basically kind of what I already said. But, even though it's not concurrent, it takes place over, a year rather than in the same semester. It does give us some longitudinal cross-section collaboration, which I think is kind of good because it extends it. And like I said, I've invited some of my students from the spring class to come back to represent. And I've also, in the course I'm teaching this semester called Future Food, I've asked some of the students to work on it as well. But add AI. So I thought to make it a little different was to add AI, because AI is, really, it's an important component of how we're, dealing with technologies these days. And so if we're going to talk about the Mars project, it's definitely going to have AI integration at some point. All right, so that's what I have to say for now. I'll stop sharing and I'll turn it back over to Claire Penny.
Thanks, Joseph. That's really helpful. Saves me saying a lot. You've covered our collaboration and how we work together, which obviously these guys have been told about. There are some students in the room who did work on the Food Forest project last year because they're 2-year master's students. Quite a few. You did it. Yeah, there's quite a few who've done it, Jake. So it's really nice that we can continue to progress with these collaborations. And I just think it makes it more interesting than just presenting to me all the time and those here, that we have this kind of cross-Atlantic collaboration. So in terms of what these students have been doing, just to follow on, so that Joseph shared the papers from his students that were done in spring. So we had those arrive over summer. And then these students have been working for 4 weeks. So the first 4 weeks of our semester here, they've been working in groups of 5 or 6 to come up with either on-Earth or off-Earth solutions. So that's following the 2 papers that were written, which Joseph will talk about, or his students will. So on-Earth solutions. So we set up locations for these. So the on-Earth solution teams, they will talk about it in more detail, but they were given a site in Turkey where there was an earthquake a couple of years ago, and it was looking at how we could deliver these Mars systems to a disaster zone, and how that might work in the short and then the longer term as people, for example, in the city in Turkey have been living in camps for 2 years. They're still living in camps. There's still a lot of rebuilding to do. So it's also thinking about not just the immediate needs of people in terms of food, but also the need for the community to have places to gather and to create a sense of well-being following a disaster. And then we have the off-Earth teams. So they had to think about potential first moon base. So we're at Artemis 2 at the moment in terms of NASA's mission to the moon, to get back to the moon. And we're now looking, I think it was Artemis 10 was about the version that they were looking at. So when there's a permanent base on the moon with humans there permanently. So it's led to lots of really creative things. We've got some fantastic models in the room, and the students have got photos of those to show you guys online. As part of it was to create a handmade model. We like doing that here at UEL, be creative. So I'm looking at some models as I talk to you. They're all at the front, but you'll get to see them on the screen. So yeah, so essentially it's a design-based project, but there's a lot of research as well. So understanding the context of the place, understanding the context of what you can deliver, what's feasible to deliver, as well as having some fun in terms of creativity, and just, you know, thinking about what could be on Earth and off. So yeah, so that's what these guys have been doing. Joseph, do you want to kind of move forward to talk about the papers?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Let me share again and get to these papers. This one. Okay, I'm trying to find the, let me see, paper. Maybe this is the one. Let me see. This is one paper. I don't want that paper right now. Shucks here. Give me a second, because I got two papers here that I brought up, but oops, but I'm not seeing this second one. That one's there.
That's
This
fine.
one's
So
on.
maybe I'll just explain a bit about our program, Joseph. So we have got some external people who perhaps know a bit less about.
Yeah.
So
You're going to explain what, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the key things that we do with our program, so we're teaching professional landscape architecture. We're teaching these students to go out into the world and become landscape architects. We're an accredited program, accredited by the Landscape Institute, who are the equivalent to ASLA in the USA. Another part of research that I'm involved with is with the International Federation of Landscape Architects. I'm hoping some of them might be on the call, or certainly will definitely be watching the recording later. And we're working on a project which looks at disaster recovery, and how landscape architecture can build more resilient places, deal with disaster relief. And so we've invited them today because one of our objectives in that group, which is a 2-year project, is to integrate disaster management into landscape architecture programs around the globe. So we're kind of blazing a trail here in terms of the first project of that kind, in terms more so of the on-Earth projects. And we'll be sharing, you know, how that was done and the outcomes, and then looking at lessons to be learned, so that we can then provide curriculum for universities around the world to integrate that into their teaching as well, to kind of set us up as a discipline to help these things in practice in the future. I can see you found your tree huggers report, Joseph.
Yeah, I know. I named the teams the on Earth were the tree huggers, which they seem to like that term. I named the off Earth ones the space cadets. I don't think they were quite as happy with that that label. But so I noticed that my Liz Briggs was part of this team that did the modular adaptive resource systems focused on disaster relief approach. And she's here, and so I'll probably have her help me with the presentation that they did. But I think for the paper, I just want to kind of like go through the paper real quickly, just, you know, get a chance to see it. The other students were Nicholas Gonzalez, Andre Alexandria Lawrence, and Margot Pomeroy, and Carlos Whitfield. Now, this was last spring. We completed the semester in May, and so the paper was for April. So I had invited students back, but you know, some of them weren't able to attend. Let's see. So I guess it's a matter of just kind of going through this. Like, So of course we asked, for a cover page. And I also asked them to put some kind of picture or poem or saying or something on the right after the cover page, so that sets the tone for the paper. And so they decided to put in this figure, and then some saying by Norman Borlaug: "You can't build a peaceful world on empty stomachs and human misery." And Borlaug was sort of the architect of the Green Revolution. And so there was an introduction, of course, which kind of breaks down what the project's about, and a project history, and nice good citations. So they talk, pretty much about different other farms that they did research on. Of course, we have a literature review, um, which is really important. You need to look at all of the literature out there so that you can get a sense to know, you can compare and contrast, and maybe even find where there is a lack of information. And that's where, students are supposed to create information based upon what they know, but also what they notice isn't there. And so try to fill the spaces. Some This figures here looking at ongoing shipping container structures, the benefits, the drawbacks, as well as what they look like on the inside. So this is a technology that does exist. A lot of it is connected to the grid, and so the idea of Mars is to make them autonomous. That how do we have them not be necessarily connected to the grid? Because a lot of times, if there's a disaster, the grid is down, and so these systems need to be deployable where they are self-contained, whether they're getting energy from solar and wind, and those are some of the goals to make them autonomous. So that's the literature. Then let's see, the students, I had them talk individually a little bit about how they contributed to the project, because even though these are team projects, I don't want people to lose their personalities. I wanted to make sure that even though they work as a team, I wanted to also hear their individual voices, and see how they contributed to the paper. Yeah, so those are the things that were in there: reflections by the students, and of course recommendations. That is, a very important component. Is, what do you recommend that we do, and what's realistic? Um, and I noticed the students did talk about, even though these are ambitious projects, they don't necessarily pan out the way we would like them to. There are certain factors that we have to take in consideration. And I was kind of glad to hear that. And I think maybe Liz will be able to elaborate on that a little more. Um, and here's a sort of artist rendition of what one of these systems may look like once it's deployed in a disaster relief area. And so the idea I always feel with these shipping containers, you can have uh, ones that have fresh produce in it, but you can also bring containers that have canned goods and dry goods and supplies and things like that. It doesn't, you can't expect one shipping container to do it all. But I also look at it as possibly a whole matrix of shipping containers that could be deployed, where some may even have, you could have one that contains stores water. You could have some that have batteries in them, so that stores the energy. You could have medical supplies. You could have residential shipping containers, almost like a village. I could see sort of a connection, like almost like Legos, where you could put together, many shipping containers, and that where you could have like a little operation of food production, energy production, water purification and supply, health, medical assistance as well. So they close with this vignette that food is national security, food is economy, it's employment, energy, history. Food is everything, by Jose Andres. And then their bibliography. And so that was the On Earth paper that I sent to Claire. And I think I will Stop. Okay, stop sharing here. There's Liz. Hey, Liz. So now what I'm going to do is, let me introduce Liz, since she's one of the students who's from the previous semester and contributed to this paper. Liz, do you want to speak to the East Londoners?
So much. It's a pleasure to see you all. Hi, everybody. Oh, yay. And Miss Penny, it's so good to see you again. I was very, very happy to be able to observe this symposium last year and see all the wonderful work that you guys were doing with the food forest and hear about sugarcrete. That was so cool. And it's a pleasure to be back this year with something to say. Last year, I just sat quietly and listened, but Dr. Dorsey knows that's not really my style, so I'm glad I have something to say this year.
Yes, yes.
So I'm a graduate student. Dr. Dorsey is my faculty advisor. I'm in the food concentration. I'm also concurrently working on a master's in public health, so I'm in 2 tracks. Which is fun, but crazy and stupid. Don't do 2 graduate programs at the same time. I don't recommend it. But I was involved with the On Earth team, aptly called the Tree Huggers. Yes, we enjoyed that. And we had a good time with the project, but it also ended up being somewhat more challenging than we had hoped. And Dr. Dorsey spoke to that to a certain extent. The conclusions that we came to were that as far as food and shipping containers, probably the best thing we could do would be to plan on one for shelf-stable pantry foods like rice and beans, and then a second one that we could set up for hydroponics. But even then, we ran into some design limitations, and that I think is where you guys come in, because you can overcome some of the things that we just couldn't quite figure out how to manage. Part of that was, I think that one of the biggest concerns that we had was if we were going into a disaster related situation with a shipping container that had solar panels on top of it that we were using to power grow lights inside the shipping container, that it didn't make sense when we also have the sun, right? So if we could use sunlight directly to grow our plants, and we were sort of eliminating that step by creating solar panels and then grow lights underneath it, that in a disaster scenario, it seemed likely that people would unplug the grow lights and plug in their phones, that there would be needs that were perceived as being more critical and urgent than growing, for example, microgreens, which actually that brings me back around to microgreens. Microgreens are great. We highly recommend them. Part of what we looked into with the project was trying to figure out what our quickest growing, most nutritious foods to augment basically a baseline diet of rice and beans would be. We learned a lot about the World Food Program food baskets that they typically distribute, which contain a bean, a grain, vegetable oil, and iodized salt. And we tried to figure out, what was going to augment that we could grow quickly and that was going to be of the most benefit most quickly. And we landed on microgreens, baby greens, a few other things. But man, those microgreens are great. So now, excuse me, now I'm getting both ahead of and behind myself. I wanted to say importantly that that we were concerned about the solar panels being co-opted for other uses. But I think that if you guys are prioritizing off-Earth projects, that's not going to be as much of an issue, because I think that greenhouses are not really a reasonable way of growing food on actual Mars. So perhaps that's not going to be as big of a stumbling block as it was for us. But Dr. Dorsey, am I forgetting anything critically important?
No, it's good. I'm going to actually bring up the presentation in a minute so you can help work on that. But I wanted to show this. I'm going to show it to the camera. This is called Solar Tube. Solar Tube. I think it's a company here in Florida that does it. And so I've been thinking about how do we deal with, for example, LED lights. Of course, we want to have a light source inside the shipping containers for the plants to grow. But the solar tube, I think it's a great idea that we could retrofit on shipping containers where it brings in the natural sunlight through reflective mirrors. As you can see in this picture here, that the sunlight comes in and it goes into the interior and illuminates based upon mirrors. And so it's passive solar. It's not energy, but it brings in the light. And so I always thought that instead of putting windows in the solar panels, because of course that's going to cause issues. But if you have these solar tubes, that could be a great way that and when there isn't any sun, then you turn on the LEDs. But you could use the solar tubes and save your LED power and energy. So there's a lot of technologies out there that we can look and utilize. I'm going to share again, and let's see if I can get to the presentation now. What is this one? No, it's not the one I want. I'm having a hard time making sure I get the. Okay. PowerPoint slide, not that one. I keep on. Is this it? It's not showing me anything. Okay. Yeah, maybe I have to do this first. Then reduce it. I'll try to share it. Oh. But there we go. Yeah, I don't know what to keep moving it around to get it to work. Anyway, Liz, maybe you can kind of help me through this one.
Absolutely.
Let's see, where's the, okay, this is not a PowerPoint, so I have to reduce it. All right, so this is the first page, and this is, once again, the tree huggers, same visual. Actually, this visual is a little more elaborate than the previous one with the solar panels and the wind. And so and two shipping containers stacked in windows. And you can see around is sort of a disaster area. And so this is the theoretical framework that we were using to say this is how we could maybe deploy the system. I'm going to go to the next slide. So this was one of the other students. I don't know if there was any voiceover to this, but I think it was just more or less the students were putting their faces there so we know who's talking at the time when they did their presentation, because this was mostly online. But then the introduction, they talked about how the world is facing increasing climate, social, and economic uncertainty. To address food sustainability and security, there needs to be macro and micro solutions for everyday use to the disaster response. And that's why we think that the Mars is a potential option to address these issues, because it's controlled environment technologies, which uses shipping containers as viable disaster relief solutions. This was Carlos. Carlos not here to really elaborate on it, but I guess they were looking at the history of these type of vertical farms and containers beginning in like the early 2010s. There's a company called Freight Farms who kind of, I guess, founded this technology around 2011. And then there's Leafy Green Machines. So you can probably look these up, and these are just certain companies that are there that are doing this type of technology work, growing and evolving to say 48 states in America, as well as 32 countries. So they do shipping containers for emergencies. You can see they can be brought in by truck. We could also maybe deploy them by helicopters and planes and so forth. Could be a rapid deployment. Of course, like we said before, controlled environments. If there is a grid, that's good, but if there isn't a grid, we would need to have some alternative forms of energy. But, shipping containers are indestructible. They're ubiquitous. They're all over, they're all standardized. And so you could quickly stack them, protect them from pests, protect them from the environment, protect your produce from theft. But you can also move them, and that was an important component of it, is the mobility aspect of moving them from place to place. If there does flooding take place, you can move them up, hill or whatever. You can move them to places where it's needed, and if it's not needed, you can take them away or whatever. And so, once again, this is a resource. The efficiency of, say, hydroponics has to do with water rather than soil. And so, as we know, in regular growing agriculture, you need soil. Soil is living, it has the microorganisms and the worms and the bugs and things and that break it down to give you those nutrients. But if you have flooding, it gets washed away. Or if you have drought conditions, or erosion, then you can't grow. And so hydroponics becomes an alternative form of food growing. With plants, basically what they need is several things. They need nutrients, they need sunlight, they need water, and they need something to hold the root structure in place. And as long as you have those four components, you can pretty much grow many varieties of plants, particularly these green leafy vegetables, as you see here. Some of the advantages, of course, is if you have it within, like you say, controlled environments within a shipping container with LED lights and so forth, you can pretty much grow all year round. You're not subject to the seasonal changes, temperature. You can keep the temperature, pretty much steady. But also being that it's in a liquid solution, rather than having to leach the nutrients out of soil, the nutrients are absorbed much quicker into the plants, somewhat like a straw, and so they can grow more rapidly. And so that is, one of the great advantages of this form of growing, is you can grow it all year round under any type of seasonal conditions, because it's not subject to the seasons, and it grows much quicker, so you have more yields of crops, quicker. And it's organic, because you're not using pesticides to keep bugs out, because you keep them out anyway. And so there are a lot of advantages. There are some disadvantages, obviously. You have to have the infrastructure, you have to have the energy supply, and you have to make sure that you monitor these systems, because the pumps and the valves and everything, if they get clogged or you get some type of virus, I guess the algae or something in there, it can take over the whole system. Or if the system shuts down because of a lack of energy, like power goes out, you could lose all your crops. So you really have to be concerned about constant monitoring, to almost to a certain degree. You're playing God to make sure that these plants survive. So it has advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. And of course, scalability is important. You can, because these systems are vertical, and that's an important component of it. When you're growing crops, horizontally, you're dependent upon acreage, but you can also have space going upwards too. And you can actually have a higher yield because of growing vertically rather than growing horizontally. So those are some of the advantages. And like you said, benefits. And in the case of emergencies, hopefully these systems can be a solution to provide for food supply. I mean, that's the one thing that we all have in common as human beings, is that we all eat. And if we're not eating, that's a problem. And in fact, all of us know that every day, if you don't eat for several hours, your stomach starts to remind you that it needs some food. And so hunger is something that is real for people. And so we have to make sure that there's a food supply for people at all times. And the security of that is important, because food supply is fragile. Growing food is not easy. And so the more we kind of perfect these technologies, hopefully the more sustainable we'll be able to be, and more resilient in times of agricultural stress. And I don't think, she's not here, but Ms. Pomeroy would be great to talk about this. But like I said earlier, the climate disaster, and that's part of why I think it's urgent that we adopt these type of technologies, because the climate is changing and getting more unpredictable. We live here in Florida, and so we have to be concerned with hurricanes that are getting larger and coming more frequently. And like I said before, if you don't have a stable agricultural environment, then how do you grow food? You have to bring it in from other places. but these other places may be under environmental stress as well. In America, it's pretty clear we've had issues of fires and drought and flooding and so forth. So, our food supplies can be very, very fragile there. And so we need to consider how do we respond in the future. And I think, this Mars project is a way for us to look at that. Yeah, so basically you can see like there's different ways we can deploy shipping containers. So oh, here we go. This is where Liz comes in. So I think, Liz, I'll let you take over because there you are.
Hey, look, it's me. Boy, I look so good in that picture. So, I spoke here a little bit about microgreens and the importance of augmenting that base layer of the World Food Program food basket. I actually did for the month of April last year. I ate the food basket for a month and then only augmented it with things I was able to grow at my house. And I am no great gardener, friends, but I was able to grow microgreens. And I'm telling you that the difference between rice and beans and oil and salt and that plus any kind of green on top of it is life-changing. Like when that's the only food that you have access to, any sort of flavor at all makes a huge difference in your mental health and quality of life. And then also those microgreens are powerhouses when it comes to vitamins and minerals. Thankfully, the World Food Program food basket, obviously they've been doing this for a long time and they do fortify what they provide with vitamins and minerals. But there's really no substitute for fresh food. And I think that that's something that we have learned time and again over the years, that supplements are limited in what they can give us. They're engineered to be the best that they can be, but they're never really going to be a substitute for good quality fresh whole food.
Okay, let's move to the next.
Oh, more about microgreens.
Yep.
Let's see. I said microgreens provide a quick to harvest source of micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients, as I was saying, and also quick to harvest. I mean, you can harvest microgreens in as little as 7 to 10 days, whereas a lot of the other high nutrient foods we were looking at are going to have, a 60-day, 75-day cycle, and nothing compares with how quick you're going to get microgreens onto a plate.
So these microgreens are something that we can grow hydroponically.
Oh yeah. We put them in the tray, spread out the seeds on our growth medium. We've got like a half an inch of growth medium and literally spray them with water. You don't even need to soak the tray, and they pop right up.
Okay. Recommendations. I don't know. I think we talked about a lot of things already. You have any recommendations, Liz? I think you started off talking about it earlier on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that our primary recommendation was to go 1-to-1, a shipping container of shelf-stable pantry items and a shipping container of grow space. Beyond that, we did have concerns about solar panels, but I'm excited about that flyer you were showing us. I think you're going to have to send me a copy of that, Dr. Dorsey.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's see. I think, okay, and anyway, this was about scaling, and since I don't have the student to talk about that, I don't think I have much authority to focus on it. But I guess the idea of scaling is that we can start with pilots, start small scale, and I think because they're showing islands here out in the Pacific, the idea is that islands are isolated, and maybe these are some of the places where you can deploy these type of systems because of, the difficulty of maybe getting fresh produce and things, or importing rather, things that are like fresh produce, so you can just grow it there. But with limited space and maybe, environmental stresses, these are some places where maybe we could have more deployment, even not necessarily because of disaster, but because of just the isolation. Someone was telling me, I think in Hawaii, that if they weren't getting exports, I think they only have about 3 weeks maybe of supplies before they run out of food. And so islands a lot of times are, because they're isolated, need, exports, but imports. But if you don't have those, we need to figure out ways to make them more self-reliant. Training, I suppose that's saying, these are things that you can't do unless you know what you're doing. And so some of these companies that do have these shipping container farms have maybe some kind of education and training because you have to know how to operate them. But once we have enough people who understand these systems and know how to work them, we could, it could create a lot of jobs. That's the other thing that, I'm sure people are interested in, like, what can you do with this besides just feed people? Well, you can feed yourself, by having employment and deployment. And so with these systems, it could be the wave of the future, as I said before. So as a lot of people don't see themselves as farmers. That's a kind of a old world thought about being farmers. But like I said before, because we're now becoming more urbanized, that we should consider the fact that, maybe we should become farmers again so that we can feed ourselves, not be so dependent upon corporations and so forth, and worrying about whether the environment's going to destroy crops. We can start to have more control and more control of our environments, more empowerment. That's what I mean. All right. I think I can unshare that. Any comments or questions at this point from the students? No?
I have a question.
Oh,
Okay, there's a question. Yeah.
It's for Liz.
Yes.
I think it's cool that you did the month of eating what would be packaged to these people. And did you notice any differences in your health or how you felt whilst you were doing it?
Yes, absolutely, which is so embarrassing, but I was so much healthier. I was so much healthier because I forced myself to eat whole foods for a month. And I have to admit that, I'm pescatarian and I eat healthy, but pescatarian, especially with the standard American diet, means that I can go to McDonald's and get a filet of fish meal and I'm totally on my diet, right? But for a month, I was eating so healthy. I have some chronic health issues related to my stomach where I have doctors telling me that I should be eating easy to digest foods, which includes things like bananas and melon and white flour and white sugar. And for a month, I was eating these high fiber foods, which my dietitians have told me for years, oh, don't eat high fiber because it's going to bother your stomach. But it turns out when you're consistently eating a diet of whole foods, even when it's not what maybe the doctors think is the right thing for you, you end up being healthier. Now, I'm telling you this, and then of course, obviously, don't go and not follow your doctor's advice because of some things some crazy lady in the US is saying on a Zoom call. But my personal experiences were I was so healthy. I had no GI pain, which is an ongoing thing for me. I don't know why I stopped, man. I just got tempted by those filet of fish meals again.
Hey, I know what he's saying. I used to be hooked on filet of fish and fries too, but I broke that habit. So
I respect you.
Yeah.
Dr. Dorsey.
well, let me move on to the next wave, the off Earth. Let me share and see if I can get this working quickly here.
I should just say while Joseph's doing that in the UK we call them fillet of fish, which is not as nice as a fillet of fish, but we call them fillet of fish.
Okay. So okay, so this is the second paper. Now this is like I said, the off Earth colony, or as I like to call them, the space cadets. But anyway, I don't think any of them are attending this symposium. But their paper was called Seeds of Survival, Building a Self-Sustaining Food System for Off-Earth Colonies. And as I said before, there's a cover page and the visual that they put here, I wanted to make sure that there was some vignette. And so don't think that the human race will survive the next 1,000 years unless we spread into space. There are too many accidents that can befall life on a single planet. But I'm an optimist. We will reach out to the stars. That was Stephen Hawking. And let's see. So of course, we have an introduction. Let's see if I, the project history and context, and this one has a lot of great visuals in it, and they're showing like the vertical farming that's taking place. So this is kind of, imagine this being on a colony, space colony, or on a space station or something to that effect. NASA, of course, we have NASA, and they're doing a lot of this already. They're, it's not like this is the first time that they've looked at growing food in space. Occasionally, I get a chance to look at some videos from the International Space Station where they're growing plants up there and doing various things. So I think there was a paper. Oh, yeah, I had a paper here that I was going to show you guys, but maybe I'll get to it later. But yeah, it's going on. The other universities are doing things with this too. University of Central Florida has also got programs around growing food in outer space, as well as University of Florida. So we're just trying to jump on the bandwagon to be a part of the so-called space race. Here's some other visuals that the students put in the paper. And you guys have got a chance to see these papers already, so it's hopefully this is just something you've already seen. A lot of nice little visuals of the artificial light. So we don't necessarily need sunlight, and that's may surprise some people, but there's certain frequencies, light frequencies, can allow plants to grow as if they had sunlight. And as we see here, soilless farming systems. It's going to be hard to take soil into outer space, so you may have to make it yourself. Water is another thing. Water is very heavy. So where do we bring water? How much water can you bring with? And that's the great thing about recirculating the water, like say with hydroponics or actually aeroponics is probably even better system because it's a mist of moisture rather than, it's just water flowing, but, lubricating the roots with mist of water. That conserves the water. You don't want any evaporation. You want to recirculate. And that's the great thing about those systems, that the water that you have doesn't leave the system very easily. It can be recirculated over and over. And you just have to pay attention to the nutrient levels to make sure that they're at a certain balance for the plants. But so it's a conservation system. Here's another system of growing potatoes. I think a lot of you may have seen the movie The Martian, with where he was growing potatoes and having to use his own urine and feces and all that kind of stuff. So that's real. I guess growing in space there's an ick factor there because you're gonna have to be recycling even the human water as well and things, and so nothing is wasted. And so some growing pans there. They were looking at the weight of the fresh weight of certain plants. I guess there's certain moisture needs that they have. One of the students focused a lot on mycelium, I guess you could say mushrooms, another way for saying mushrooms, as a part of the food regime for outer space. Some people may have talked about insects as well. I think they talked about insects as a source of protein. And you can do, actually, this is kind of related to the sugarcrete, that, as far as bricks, you can also use the mycelium to make MISO bricks too. If I don't think any of you were here last year, but last time we did this symposium, my colleague, Dr. T.H. Colhane, had talked about his work with wastecrete, which meant he used plastics as well as recycled plastic and mixing it with glass that was grind up into sand to make sort of bricks that way as well. And so last year we had a really nice discussion about material economy, material waste, and the trashcrete and the sugarcrete. And then one of my students, former students, Erica Lee, she had talked about composting clothing, breaking down clothing into compost to sort of supplement, compost that's coming from food waste. And so that was last year. But this year, like I said, you don't want to forget some of these earlier material ecologies because it all should come into play as we look towards living on other other places outside of the earth. And this shows a mushroom-based circular economy. So mushrooms are really interesting. They're sort of like cross between plants and animals. When I say that, I mean it sounds kind of extreme, but they're neither plants nor animals, but some kind of like in between of what we are, And so they have a lot of protein. They grow certain ways. They grow pretty much anywhere, and they spread. They have a root structure, but they also can have these sort of pods they send out to spread themselves. And so they're a very interesting form of life that we would most likely make sure we control, I guess, in outer space, because I can see it proliferating in ways maybe we don't want it to, but it can be something that can help us out. And so this is a table here of looking at the difference between farming methods in space as well as on Earth, the aspects of water, recirculating water, energy use, infrastructure, and so forth. This paper was very extensive. It's a pretty long paper. It's 25. I don't know how many pages it is, but it's getting up into the 20s, 27 pages. 20. I think the limit was like 20. I told them, but I didn't have a problem with that. I tell my students all the time, because I get, you know how students are, they want to know, page number, and they get worried about being penalized if they go over. I said, I probably penalize you if you go under, less, if too little, but I said, I don't like them to focus just on the page numbers. Tell me what you need to tell me. And if you need more pages, if you more pictures and graphs and diagrams and so forth, do whatever, I'll read it. If it's good reading, I'll read, 30 pages if necessary. And so here the students had their reflections on working on this project, which was kind of nice to hear what they had to say. So this was it keeps going. It's going and going. So the final vignette here. Well, I'm not going to read it. I'll let you read it because I don't want to offend anybody. But this came from an Apollo astronaut who is basically saying how we need to have a global consciousness. If we could see the Earth from outer space, we would understand that we're really a small, on this fragile planet, that's floating in the void, the dark void of space. Look at this blue-green, drop of water, pretty much floating in the darkness of space, and we need to respect that. So, yeah. All right, so what I'm going to do now is share the actual presentation. Yeah, this was because that's why I like to have these papers be team papers, because it's nice to have students work together like you guys are doing to put your talents and insights together to work collectively, because that's the only way we're going to really make changes in the world, is working together. And so I think this is really important. Now let me make sure that I got the next one there. Tend to have to bring it up and then reduce it in order to share it. Let's see, the last one. Okay. So this is the actual presentation from that paper. James Adams was part of that, Allegria Ben Simeon, Gloria Mar Rivera, Zamario, and Sung Shao, and Tony Lemons and Daniel Mock were the students. And it's all right. So this one, once again, I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly because, just like their paper, it's a 17-page slide reduction. So I'm going to move through it. But the challenge is off-world living is logistics of having these self-sufficient space ecosystems, and the idea of recycling the water for the food production, making sure there's crop readiness levels and there's automation that's going to be there. In fact, you're probably going to have the systems automated because like humans may not have a lot of the time, or maybe they're going out doing geological things. You may have to have the systems automated so that they pretty much run themselves. We already talked a little bit about the astromycology and also the nutrition. And we sometimes forget that food is not just for eating. It's for our metabolisms. It's nutrients. It's what we need to live off of, food and water. And, the amount of calories and the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, all those things have to be there. Otherwise, we can't survive. And what is the philosophy of doing this? It was interesting that when I put the teams together for these two projects, there was one young lady who was sort of like anti, the off Earth type stuff. She was kind of questioning, why are we doing this? Why, and I thought it was kind of good to have a devil's advocate on the team. So I put her in the team rather than say, well, you're not interested in this particular project. I'm going to make you work through your own paper. Now it's like, no, why don't you just be a part of the team? Be the person there that is the skeptic, that's holding this project accountable. And so the philosophy was there that some people thought it was feasible or something we should do, and others thought, question why? Why are we doing this? James had looked at the logistics. He had kind of done some measurement here about, I guess, weight. It has to do with the cost per kilogram for payload, and apparently it looks like over time it kind of goes down. The cost goes down as we get better at the, I guess, the technology and so forth. So anyway, it's shooting past, into the future, and right now, it's not that important, but it does give you an idea that over time it should become less of a burden to transport these things into space. In-sung looked at water recycling for sustainable food production, and you can see that he talks about, recycling is up to 98% of water, including inhaled breath, urine, humidity, technologies, vacuum distillations, and filtration. Why it matters, there's no external water source. Every kilogram of water should be accountable because it's costly and it's a closed system, so everything needs to be recycled. But he also compared it to Earth-based systems such as arid regions in Africa and Middle East too. So it's similar. You have to have points of filtration, membrane-based desalination, biofiltration using natural microbes. The features of that is low cost, decentralization, powered by off-grid energy, and suitable for rural and underserved areas. So even if we're thinking towards the off Earth, a lot of the ideas should be also looked at on Earth, or some of the things that we're looking at on Earth around sort of Earth-based systems could be the things that could be applied, on Moon or Mars colonies and so forth. Okay. Design for efficiency, safety, all those things are important. I think, yeah, this had already been in the paper. They just took this table and put it in the presentation. We're comparing the farming methods, the water sources, recycling of water, energy use, and infrastructure. Things to consider. whether you're doing this on Earth or off Earth. Crop readiness, Daniel was focusing on something called 9 levels of structured scale, and things that can be done with lab trials for full space mission readiness. This has been something done by over the last 25 years. Kennedy Space System looked at bioregenerative life support conference for space crop assessments. These purposes are so that we can have, environmental tolerance, nutrition, growth efficiency, and food safety during space flight, which is happening. So this is not theoretical. A lot of this is what we need to really focus on. And this can obviously, like, once again, give people job opportunities, because, the more we focus towards outer space and living out there, the more we'll need people who have some expertise in that. I'm not going to read this. You can kind of read this yourself, but you can see how it looks at some of the projects that are out there to look at these issues of growing beyond Earth. Offer nutrition. Okay, so nutritional values and adaptivity. Potatoes are one of the sources of food that should be a part of this off-Earth, diet. High carbohydrates for potatoes, there's vitamin C and potassium, and it's been proven that it can grow in Mars soil, simulated soil. I mean, we can't really have Mars soil. We can simulate it to make it seem like Mars soil, but it has been able to grow potatoes for long duration. That's why I was in the movie The Martian, because it's something they've already tested. Carrots are also another one that's rich in the beta carotene and fiber, can thrive as a hydroponics, and something that people would like to see. I mean, it's good for the eyes and the digestive system. And of course, lettuce and radishes, things like that, are good sources of vitamin A and K and folate, and can grow fairly quickly, and can mature. Maturing quickly is important. You want your crops to move fairly quickly into your system. Let's see, we think of proteins. Of course, proteins is really important to have protein. Protein builds your muscle and your skin, all. So we can't live without protein. So, and you won't be able to have livestock up there. So if you think about taking cows and pigs and things up into space, that's just not feasible. So all our protein sources will probably come. I can imagine maybe some seafood sources, maybe, but it's going to come from things like algae. Actually, algae converts about carbon dioxide to oxygen and yields about 70% protein by dry weight. And of course, it's something that be part of an aquatic system. And in the mentioned earlier, insects offer about 60% protein by weight, and consuming organic waste, lab-grown meat. You can maybe grow meat. We do grow meat now in labs, and grow a chicken breast or whatever. I know it sounds a little gross, but it's better than trying to take a whole chicken up and have to feed them and all that kind of stuff, and the slaughter and all that kind of stuff. So in a weird way, if you got to have meat, we can actually grow meat. Once again, AI is important. Even last spring, the students were thinking about AI integration into helping us, because we need to. We're bright species, but we do need help to think things through. So having the AI will help us maybe look at all the different alternatives. Because when you're growing, you need to look at a lot of factors, such as the pH, the temperature, the nutrients. You got to look at your harvesting cycles and be able to detect any contamination that comes into your system. And like I said before, insects would be a component of that. And I sometimes tell my students this joke about, it's not really a joke, but it's a incident where I went to this place like World Market here in the States, where they have all kinds of food and furniture and different things. But I noticed that there was these candy bars or protein bars that had insect powder, like I think it was cricket powder, that was was sorts of protein in these protein bars. So I bought it because, here I am talking about how, insects will be part of our diet in the future. And I went to class and I had the protein bar and I was in front of the class and I had never opened it. And so it was unopened. And so I tore off the top and I was saying, here, this is a protein bar. It's got cricket flour in it. And I remember, biting into it and starting to eat it in front of the class. And as I'm chewing on it, I'm feeling this little bit of crunchiness in, my teeth. And there was just this little graininess that was in there. And I didn't even eat halfway through. I said, okay, well, it's not that bad, and I closed it up and put it away. But I was kind of thinking to myself, man, they're going to have to grind this cricket flour a little more because I was like tasting the shell. But, it's okay, So we have to consider that, there's an ick factor that's going to be in living in outer space. We have to be willing to eat things that we probably wouldn't eat on Earth because we will have less variety. Anyway, let's move on to, I think one of the students even okay, so Tony, she really got into the astromycology thing about talking about all different species, like the 2,000 species of mushrooms exist. And she talked about how they have these anti-inflammatory, fiber-rich, essential nutrients, unsaturated fatty acids, complex polysaccharides, all these different things, vitamin D, vitamin B, all these things are available from, these sources of mushrooms. Also have nitrogen and carbon. And so it looks like this would be a really major component of living in outer space. It says down here, the bioregenerative life support systems, what they call BLISS. So like we say, soybeans would be part of it, potatoes, quinoa. It would just have to be a really good mixture of different things that are growable in outer space. And okay, so anyway, you can kind of read the rest of it, but so now Glorimar, she was the one who said, well, if we're gonna grow food in outer space, it's got to taste good. And so she was saying she wanted to focus on, you don't want to have just the same bland food over and over again. So she was saying, what kind of herbs and spices would we have to make sure that the food is palatable and tasty and and not boring and give some diversity. And so beyond basic nutrition, she thought about challenges to flavor and the bioactive powerhouses, the other properties of these herbs and spices, and how they can also deal with chronic disease prevention. Because our digestive systems would have to definitely change over time, being, out in space and not eating food on Earth, but eating up there. But so turmeric and black pepper, she thought would be a good thing to have there because it helps to protect the nervous system, blood sugar control, cardiovascular health, cognitive enhancement. Ginger is good for nausea and vomiting management. I kind of wonder about if you're in weightless environments, whether you would probably, like when you're out to sea and you get nausea. Do astronauts get nausea in outer space? I don't know, but I'm assuming it might happen because you don't, have the same, grounding of that we have here with gravity, and that this movement might cause nausea. But anyway, having those things might be helpful. Cinnamon, which seems to be antibacterial, antifungal, also helps reduce, glucose. Chili peppers, that spiciness, can be helpful for your heart, as well as weight control and making sure that your gut microbiota is there. I think an important component is that you have to have microbes in your colonies in your gut in order to digest what you're eating. I mean, if you don't have that, we have to remember that you just don't eat food and it goes into your digestive system. You have to have, what we call the microbiome to kind of break down and protect your intestines. And so you got to make sure that you take care of your microbiome. Otherwise, nothing you eat is going to stay down or it's just going to run right through you. Rosemary is another thing that she says would be important to have. Alegria talked a little bit about G-force here, microgravity. It's a little hard to see because of the coloration of the, but she says about the impact on the human body, exposure to microgravity, and it's kind of hard to see in space missions can cause loss in muscle mass. shifting to fluids that can result in serious health conditions and long-term cognitive decline. Resource extraction, $500 billion of life support, roughly $2 billion fossil fuels to support this mission. For perspective, the Saturn uses 11, I guess the Saturn rocket uses 11,000 pounds of fuel per second. Wow. What can we learn from the mission? Medical applications to growing food and really looking at what the human experience encompasses. Anyway, but that's all the things we have to take in consideration. How our physiology will be changing in these microgravity environments and living off of things that are not a normal diet on Earth. So the outcomes of the project, space and Earth space, shared water scarcity in agriculture, hydroponics and water recycling are adaptable for both space and Earth. Mushrooms can be beneficial to establish off-Earth colonies. Food quality impacts health and morale in long space missions. Of course, morale is really important, out there isolated from the Earth, you have to make sure that doing things that are keeping people, inspired and motivated. The CRL assesses spacecraft viability, considers many factors. Ethical issues exist alongside potential Earth benefits in space research. So their recommendations were that Earth's resilient farming and water technologies are vital for space colonies. This is a key evaluating crop viability in space. Innovations in space agriculture should also benefit Earth's food, security as well. And having these hybrid proteins and mushrooms offer diverse solutions for space. And like I said before, there's this saying from the astronaut Mitchell about developing an instant consciousness about our orientation on this planet. And hopefully, we can, now that we can look back at the Earth, we can appreciate it more. But as we move towards other parts of the world, other parts of the universe per se, that we consider the fact that we are still human and we have to make sure that we do things that help us move forward as a species, but also help protect the planet as well, so that we still have a home, even if we do visit other parts of the universe. And I think that is all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
And I
much,
yield.
Joseph. Thank you very much. That's great. And thank you as well to Liz for sharing her experiences, and the question about her health was really interesting. Yeah, I don't know if any of my students would want to commit that much to their studies, but maybe I'll try that with them sometime. Okay, so we're going to take a short break, stretch our legs, and then we will come back. So we'll take a 10-minute break, come back 3:30 UK time, which is
10:30 for
10:30 for you. So we'll come back in 10 minutes, and then my
Okay.
students will present their solutions.
Thank you. See you then.
You do like a little play, like high school musical play.
No.
Nice best.
Oh, hey.
Oh, God.
Who's this cheeky monkey?
Let's see, it's just like.
Let's,
Someone talk.
Do you think we should move the model then?
we've got pictures of it.
Because I'm going to jump around. Clicking.
To Winslow, Claire. I think it's a Winslow. So welcome back, everyone. We've got 4 groups to present, so we're going to go in order of on Earth, off Earth, and then repeat. They've got 10 minutes each. Stick to your 10 minutes, guys. So the first group, will start with our on Earth project. Go ahead.
Good morning, Florida. Good afternoon, London and England. So we're going to talk about our approach to the Mars systems in Iskenderun.
So just to introduce Iskenderun, it's a major port city in Hatay province in Turkey on the coast of the Eastern Mediterranean basin. It sits within a low-lying alluvial floodplain characterised by a shallow water table and an abundance of marshes. So much of the coastal boulevard and port were formed from land reclamation. It lies west of the Nur Mountains near the Belem Pass, which was a key military and trade route, especially for the Silk Road and spices trades from Asia. And it's northwest of the River Orontes Basin, which is a major water source for this part of the region. So its proximity to the basin, the Mediterranean coast, and the trade route forged the city's worth and development as a prominent major port city.
Food is an important part of a culture. We conducted research to find which popular dishes could be locally grown. This optimizes the growing process.
Excuse me, Claire. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I can't see any. Your screen looks frozen to me. I don't know if anybody else is seeing a frozen screen.
Okay.
It's okay with me. No problems with the screen with me.
Hold on.
Okay. 1 sec. Let me just give it a. Just check. Great.
Is anybody else seeing a frozen screen from over here in America? Or is it just me?
I can see it. I can see it. Okay, Dr. Dorsey.
Oh,
This is Liz. Sorry.
yeah. Okay, so I'm wondering why my screen is the only one that's frozen. The other one needs to.
Leave and reach. Well, we'll reshare and hopefully it will catch up. Okay.
So I was saying, by using locally grown vegetables, it optimizes the growing process whilst offering comfort to those in a crisis through allowing the creation of the local comfort dishes as well. We believe comforting meals will likely distract from the disaster and allow people to be more open to creating a connection and forming community on the site, which would then hopefully lead to them staying for longer and utilizing amenities.
We also look at Turkish landscaping traditions to draw inspirations for our design. The 3 most important things we found was that Turkish landscaping is rooted in nomadic traditions where indoor and outdoor lifestyle is blend. It features semi-open spaces and shading structures, but also geometry meeting naturalism in design.
So as Dr. Dorsey mentioned a lot about the benefits for the Mars system, we also looked into the benefits it has for the overall community. Because food growing can foster collaboration, it can help develop workforce skill building, it promotes mental well-being as gardening overall usually, and it also strengthens social cohesion. There are a few challenges and potential weaknesses, for example, around water supply, dependence of electricity, and the training that is required to operate, that it was mentioned before.
Here we looked about the passive and active system of the hydroponics and permaculture. Our conclusion is that passive system could be initiatively rapidly introduced and they can be practiced with minimal effort by the communities. And also permaculture and other systems, hyperactive systems can be slowly introduced in mid-term and long-term strategies.
We looked at some really interesting precedents for solution for displaced communities. For example, the community centers at Chamanga by Actmans after the Ugandan earthquake of 2016. These were developed with participatory involvement. The developers highlighted that community kitchens and community centers were two of the most valuable needs to improve the quality of post-life disaster. So, and also as a volunteer community, Kitchen of Heart that was set up in Iskandran that has now far produced 6 million portions of food for the community.
And then another precedent that we drew inspiration from was the ambitious Viet Village farm in East New Orleans by Mossick and Michaels, which was in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, where it integrates sophisticated infrastructure, water management systems and livestock, but most importantly, introduced a marketplace to bring economic value to the residents, as well as wider wellbeing spaces, and it won the ASLA Award in 2008.
So the damage done by the earthquake was not only the infrastructure and the destruction of houses, but also because of the coastline was filled up since the 60s. A situation called like liquefaction took place that basically shaken the sandy ground, liquefied it, and it moved laterally towards the sea, which caused the ground settlement, and that led the coastline was damaged and led in flooding as well. The other issue was the fire, because it has a container terminal, which was really important in Turkey and in the Mediterranean as well. It burned several days, and this disruption was cause for the relief efforts.
So in terms of site selection, we analysed central Iskandran through a series of mapping exercises, looking at water bodies, landmarks, and green spaces. And we recognised there was a series of undeveloped open space at the time of the earthquake, or that wasn't in the zone of liquefaction and flooding. And you can see from photos pre-earthquake in 2020 and then post in 2025 that this area was identified to place much of the emergency accommodation and the containerised villages that houses the displaced dwellers. And that's shown in blue on our map. And these spaces were also close to an existing freshwater attenuation pond and play area, and the connectivity of these helped identify our site.
Our concept idea utilizes a three-phase approach. So phase one is nourishment, using the Mars systems to provide immediate fresh produce and sustenance. Phase two was then enrichment, which was creating spaces to foster community. And then phase three is bouncing forward, which is the expansion and scaling up, allowing the site and community to prosper.
So when we start looking at the concept, the first sketches, we try to thinking outside of the box of the Mars system, using the same method of simplicity, efficiency, scalability, sustainability, trying to link different modular system, create enclosed spaces, then these spaces could be supported by the Mars system, and also looked into how these area spaces could be connected, how people would move around. And for the simplicity, we thought the modular approach would do the best, and chose an octagonal arrangement with 45 degrees angles it's kind of a symbol of universal harmony, and it's easy geometric arrangement, easy to scale up.
So here, like moving from starting with phase 1, it's a visual of the immediate disaster module using a container grow pod delivery system, which would deliver the means for the community to start growing immediately with minimal training, with a lower tech passive system for indoors and outdoors, and considers gravity-fed carbon water filtration and continuous harvest system. Then this would transition to phase 2, so post-disaster expansion, with additional container types where higher tech systems could be introduced, utilising renewable energies like solar and wind, and then expanding to the introduction of well-being areas for the community, kitchen areas and areas for processing the produce to add economic opportunity, and then the wider areas for gardens, recreation, contemplation and prayer. So that's our farm park concept. And then here's initial visual just showing these connected spaces and how they could expand outwards from the containers, and a plan, again, showing our transition from the initial module for the immediate disaster relief at phase 1, expanding through octagonal arrangements to add wellbeing spaces, and culminating in phase 3, repeating the modules and linking spaces with green infrastructure for the further long-term wellbeing, using permaculture principles as well, and creating our concept.
For hydroponics, we selected local herbs and fast greens, but we also allowed for plants that take slightly longer to grow, and are still culinary relevant to the region. For the community garden, well, we layered the community garden to ensure shading, instant shading, but also deliver an immediate visual impact. We selected plants that are fast growing, native, ornamental, familiar to the people there, but also preferably edible.
This photo collage shows how we envision phase 3 to come about. So there's a lot of different spaces for the community to come together. It's not only about the food and the growing, it's also about fostering a community and offering a sort of emotional relief from the disaster as well.
And this was a really fun part to make a model to illustrate our concept. This is the phase 2 approach, when we have the containers, the modular systems, like spilling out onto the space, creating areas for food growing, community kitchen, and also to provide training and learning in a knowledge sharing zone. And in the middle, you can see it's more like a community space where people can gather. And the whole structure is based on the octagonal geometric shape in a sectional visual, basically. And that's all for our presentation.
Very nice. Love it.
I think we'll take questions for the groups as they go. Is that okay? Has anyone got questions for this group? Yeah, Liz.
Hi, I loved that. That was so great, you guys. Just very, very impressive. I wanted to share. I have been living in Florida, where USF is located, and just recently relocated to Oregon, and I'm learning a lot. And my UK geography is terrible, so please don't be insulted if I tell you I'm all the way on the west coast of the United States, because you probably know that, but I don't know. But I've been learning a lot about the local culture here, and a lot of that has been learning about the Oregon Trail and westward expansion and that part of the US history. And the octagonal setup that you guys are showing reminds me of the wagons, the circling the wagons when people were moving west across the United States. And that there's this misconception that it was because, oh, there were Indian attacks, and so they were defending themselves. And it was a community thing. It was creating a corral for livestock and creating a safe space for people to cook together and to have that community as they were traveling across the plains. So I absolutely loved, it's less of a question and more of a compliment, but I absolutely love the presentation you guys gave. I love the focus on community. I love the focus on regional herbs and cuisine and the things that are going to provide comfort in those moments of disaster. I think that is something that I also sort of accidentally hit on while we were working on our project, that there's something incredibly comforting about food when it's done right, and that the opposite is also true, that when you do a lousy job of food, then you're hurting more than you need to. So just fabulous job, you guys. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yes,
Liz.
sir.
Any
Can
other
I follow
questions?
on from Liz?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, Liz, that's been great. I agree with everything you say about the content. I'll just add, in terms of your presentation, that was excellent. That model is absolutely outstanding. Are those
Yes.
photos of the real physical model that just is so, look,
I can show you, sir.
it looks great. And actually the whole there's a lot of laughing going on. Okay.
Oh, wow. Nice.
That is really it's amazing. And the photos of it was amazing. I'll add that also given that the time that you've had that's not just the background thought, but that the slide pack and those presentations were really excellent as well. And one thought about the growth of that octagonal model is that you're actually, communities will, those associations with those spaces, you're actually kind of placemaking for the future with that, if you've got those, oh yeah, you're nodding. So I guess that's something you've discussed, that those are going to feel so important to people in the regeneration, the long-term regeneration. It's just, really impressed with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm impressed as well by what you guys took our ideas and really elaborated them and surpassed a lot of what I wanted to see happen. I said, okay, this is even better than I imagined. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Okay, so we'll move on to group 2.
Our presentation.
Yeah.
Straight to. I didn't. Worse than you had. It's true.
Ben, actually, I got that wrong.
Sure. Hi guys. So today we're going to talk to you about our off-Earth Mars solution. I am Maddie, Amy, Chanello, Jake, and Abu. We've got a very brief agenda, so we'll go through this. First one being just a recap of what we're going to do today. We want to design a modular adaptive resource system on the moon that supports food production whilst also enhancing social and mental well-being of its inhabitants. So moving on into the site analysis, there are many constraints on the physical environment, and the first one being water. So believe it or not, there is actually water on the moon. However, it exists primarily as ice in the permanently shadowed craters, and these are located on the poles. These don't receive direct sunlight, so they're very, very cold, like minus 160 degrees Celsius. That means that extraction and melting are technologically difficult and also very expensive. And even if we had liquid water, the low gravity environment means that it pulls around the plant roots and causes hypoxia. In terms of air, there's a very thin exosphere on the moon. That means that there's no breathable atmosphere for humans, plants, or any kind of life like that. There's also no radiation protection, and that means that any life support system that we design must fully recycle the air to maintain the pressure as well. And soil, so soil on the moon isn't as we know on Earth, it's actually called regolith, and it contains no organic matter. It's generally toxic with high salt contents. It's very alkaline, and there's also toxic metals present as well within it. The particles themselves are very small and sharp because there's no weathering on the moon, which means that they can damage the roots by scratching them, and there's also very little water retention.
So moving on to solar radiation. So solar radiation is the radiation that's emitted from the sun. We get it here on Earth, but because we have an atmosphere, it's not as intense as it is on the moon. So because of the lack of atmosphere, it really affects the lunar surface and kind of how the moon works. And we've kind of looked at how we could possibly use this solar radiation to kind of put it into energy use and again kind of reuse all of that. So then moving on to temperature and climate. So because of the fact that there is no atmosphere, the temperature swings on the moon are crazy. You can go from 127 degrees to minus 173 degrees. It's obviously kind of shielding, and it's really difficult to place things outside. Obviously, a lot of things would have to be undercover. So kind of all of that shows that the lunar climate is ever changing. You have a lot of different things you don't have on Earth. It's a really stark environment, and there's also some really interesting research that's been done. When we first went to the moon, we actually warmed it. We warmed the surface by kind of movement and moving around. And I think that's really interesting to show how human intervention on other planets can also change the environment as it has here on Earth. So that's something that we'd have to think about. So yeah, moving on to design, concept and development. When we did our initial research, a lot of the site analysis, obviously because it's not on Earth, it's a completely different space. It was a lot of research, background research to go into it. But our concept is rooted in the landscape character of the moon. Obviously, you don't really have a lot of conceptual things to go off of up there. But when we were doing our research, we found things called lunar swirls. So lunar swirls occur where there are localized magnetic fields on the moon. They kind of act as a sunscreen, which deflects solar radiation and wind from the surface. And it kind of creates chemical reactions with the regolith. And then it kind of makes these really distinct regions, as you can see here, with these lunar swirls. So we found that really interesting, and we thought that was a really strong base for our conceptual design. So the swirl concept kind of came about from sketching over, as you can see here, kind of sketching over these designs. As a team, we went hands-on, we printed all of these out, cut them up, stuck them everywhere around the studio, and kind of looked to see how we could create flow between these spaces, and how these would work in terms of modular adaptive resource systems, how we could allow users to connect with the moon's natural beauty, as well as, yeah, kind of making something that would work. So moving on.
So this is our master plan. The form of it was obviously inspired by the lunar swirls. The lunar swirls, they gave us like a bit of a blueprint to work from with like the bubble-like form, sort of helped us plot where each of our modules are going to go. So the benefits of a modular system include increased flexibility and adaptability through various configurations, improved maintainability, meaning issues can be isolated and fixed within individual modules. Enhanced reusability. Modules can be reused across different systems, promoting efficiency and reducing the need for new modules. That in result goes to a cost reduction, reducing complexity, leads to significant cost savings throughout the product's life cycle. So for our master plan, the components that we included were sleeping quarters, life support module for water treatment and oxygen. We've got a greenhouse for growing food, a lab for experiments, testing, seed counting for future planting, and a power module to power the whole moon base. Other benefits that a modular system brings to the occupants is the adaptable and human-centered living. So it offers personalization opportunities to give occupants a sense of control over their environment, which is vital for their long-term health. Community and social cohesion, providing communal areas where occupants can come together, encouraging regular social interaction and teamwork, which leads into collaboration and work efficiency. There's psychological and emotional well-being. So green modules or biophilic spaces provide daily connection to living spaces and systems. We have rhythmic roots around around our master plan as well. It's sort of got a circular flow to it. So it means the layout can be organized around daily rhythms, helping create normality and a shared routine in an otherwise alien environment. This leads on to the construction of our base.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk just very briefly about the structure of our dome. We designed it to be quite lightweight, similar to NASA's inflatable habitat. And also thought it's really important, like Jacob spoke about it being flexible and modular. So that allows that connection between different areas. And that feeling of not feeling isolated is really important. So that sense of helping your well-being and how you interact with other people that are within the space with you. Throughout the top part, having solar panels on different parts of the dome. And also a really important bit was to kind of be able to see into different spaces, because I think that sense of being able to, even if you're not with someone, being able to see into another part of the flexible dome system helps that interaction.
So hydroponics and green walls provide vertical green spaces, increasing the volumes of planted space. The biggest benefit of these systems is that they are soilless. They use a growing medium of expanded clay, which is oxygen rich, and within this medium, a biofilter which contains nitrifying bacteria, worms and fungi, which converts ammonia to nitrate, providing essential nutrients for plant growth.
We also looked at designing an underground mushroom lab. So these are positioned in pre-existing lunar lava tubes that were created when there were basaltic eruptions on the moon. The inspiration from this was taken from a recent development in the Netherlands, where they designed vertical columns made out of recycled egg cartons to grow these mushrooms from. So the cartons act as a substrate and they don't really need anything else other than that and some water. There are some misting jets to make sure that the atmosphere is maintained moist, and there are air ventilations as well to ensure the air is circulated. As Dr. Dorsey mentioned, mushrooms kind of respire rather than photosynthesize like most plants. So the CO2 that they release can then be used elsewhere in the modular system to help other plants grow.
So moving on to spaces for social and mental well-being. Obviously, as well as just surviving on the moon, mental health is going to be super important for any occupants. You're very isolated. You're going to be with the same people day in, day out. So there's going to have to be spaces for community cohesion to kind of get together. And there's been a lot of research about how people on the International Space Station often kind of take their time out and like they have their peace and stuff from looking at the Earth kind of from space. So we came up with the idea of an observation deck, and looking at how this worked, we were looking into knitting and crochet designers, and how we could create a kind of hammock above the greenhouse space. So again, trying to use that vertical space, trying to get as much in as possible. We looked at colour, because colour's super important.
certain colours, especially blues, greens, can be grounding, relaxing. And again, the location above the greenhouse links to the visual connections to nature, which is known to conquer cognitive fatigue and enable a lot of mental focus. So moving on to what kind of things we'd plant.
We selected 20 species according to the NASA ESA studies. Some of these species are already raised in International Space Station. Our species divide in 4 groups. The first group can grow without soil in hydroponic system. The second group is for the producing oxygen and for the cleaning air. The third group is reduce stress and make habitats feel alive. And the last group is for the recycling waste and help create a closed loop system.
So our key outputs, we have hopefully designed something that could work as a modular adaptive resource system on the moon. We are looking for a space to enable food security and sustainability that also supports the mental well-being of moon inhabitants through restorative and biophilic environments. And hopefully something similar to this could pave the way for possible lunar habitation. So thank you. And there's our model.
Cute, like it.
Okay. Any questions for this group? Liz, you're in first again.
Again, that was so fun, and I loved seeing the model at the end with the hammock. That was really cool. I had never heard of regolith before. Did I get that right? Lunar regolith. Yeah. That was cool. But also very overwhelming for me as an on-Earth person. Like, so I'm curious. I'm very invested in like soil building stuff, but that's like a non-starter on the moon, right? Like it has to be hydroponic because there's really no hope of soil building. Yeah.
There's been research into how regolith could be used. Obviously, when they went up to space years ago, they took some of the regolith back to Earth. And there has been research. You can grow from it, but it's not great. It's not the best system to use. I think in our master plan, we kind of had an outdoor growing space as well that could be experimental to kind of try and see if you can mix anything with the regolith. I think there's been research, correct me if I'm wrong, but into trying to reproduce it to see kind of how it could work and what things we'd need to add to it to make it work as a system. But yeah, it's going to be difficult. So a lot of it is going to be based on hydroponics, aeroponics, reusing waste and things like that. So yeah, it's difficult. It's a difficult substance to work with.
Can you? Totally, yeah. Can you talk to me more about reusing waste? Because again, with the on-Earth models that I was involved in, we could sort of maintain this idea of, if they need more hydroponic nutrients, we'll just ship them, right? But I assume that that's not really part of your thinking or less part of your thinking if you're talking about shipping to the moon. So are you guys thinking about recycling waste as like a nutrient system for the hydroponics?
Yeah, the ick factor again. Yeah, we did mention we left out of the presentation to save time, but we did look at anthroponics. So using human urine, obviously as a fertilizer, it's quite nutrient rich. So that's something that we was looking at. There's a lot of human waste that you can use as a fertilizer. So yeah, there is those that we did look into. We just didn't include it in the presentation.
It all kind of feeds into that closed loop system kind of idea where absolutely everything that is used on the moon gets reused in some way, shape or form. So there's no waste. You try and be as sustainable as possible in that environment and try and get things moving. But it
awesome.
was a very interesting topic to research.
Sure.
A lot of different.
Thank you guys so much. Wonderful again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to ask her, there was one term that I'm not familiar with behind the hydroponic and the aeroponics. I noticed in one slide you mentioned anthroponics. Is that a thing, or did y'all make it up, or did I just miss something?
No, that's a thing, apparently.
So
It's a thing, really? Okay.
yeah, I visited a place in Amsterdam that
Okay.
is sort of like a forward-thinking like research center, and they had a hydroponic like experiment going on, and they basically routed the urinals in the men's toilets onto it when they had plumbing issues, just as a extra experimental thing that they were doing. And yeah, when I obviously visited, I thought that was quite like out there, so it always just stuck in my mind. So it kind of popped up at the right time for this project, I guess. It's called Mediamatic, if you're writing that down.
Okay. Okay, so the anthroponics aspect is using toilet water?
No, urine, yeah.
Urine, okay, urine. All right, well, that's close enough.
Yeah.
Okay, urine. All right. Now I get it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, group. Okay. Group 3.
Sleep.
No.
Wait, you have to go to the very beginning of the slide. Sorry, at the very end. You've ruined our wow factor.
Yeah.
We hope you close your eyes.
You go up and down.
Yeah.
Great. So we are back to Earth, so to Turkey, yeah. So I'm not going to spend much time talking about, we had to research about history and talk about the history of the place, the location. I think the only thing I'm going to add to that is that it's quite a key location. There was quite an interesting history about this location because it's by the sea. The port also is at the foot of a mountain. It's quite protected in that, and also is border with other countries, Syria. So there was a great influence in history, and I made a list here of historical sort of inputs. So there was Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Arabic, Muslim, Mamluk, which is an army made of slaves that at some point dominated the area. Obviously, the Ottoman and then became Turkish. In 1333 BC, Alexander the Great took the area and renamed it Alexandrita, I think after his name. Yeah. Because of its location. During the Ottoman Empire as well, the era, there was when this port, which was so important, sort of grew, and there was lots of trades to this port. And then after the First World War and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, it was given to the French, and there was this French mandate, which sort of tried to organize the area to reestablish to people. And in 1939, the area was given back to Turkey, where it is now. So because of this, we had here research of the area, and then we looked at the buildings, which to look at the historical side of it. Because of this mixed sort of cultures and influence, the area is quite mixed as well. There's like a grid system, like the old cities, and lots of different religious sort of buildings representing all the religions that sort of stayed in the area. So we have here an example of this historical buildings here, from Catholic to other temples. So and the majority of them, they were destroyed during the earthquake, which sort of creates this sort of problem with the identity, which we're going to talk later about that.
So for food and culture in Turkey, we found it really important for was more than about nourishment for them when feeding them. They really enjoyed coming together, having a shared experience, and a shared experience especially over food, and the idea of family over everything, as well as the Turkish values of generosity, togetherness. Their diet is a blend of really a load of different cultures, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, as well as Central Asian influence because of the Silk Road and the trades. We've got this food pyramid on screen as well that shows the key staples of breads and bulgur wheat, as well as vegetables and legumes, legumes, which we really wanted to focus on later when we're developing our hydroponic schemes, and as well as what we're going to grow.
Okay, so I'm going into the damage caused by the earthquake. So on February the 6th, 2023, Turkey, the central and southern part of Turkey, as well as the northern and western part of Syria was hit by 2 earthquakes in 9 hours. The first one measuring 7.8 on the Richter scale, the second one 7.5. And following that, in the next 3 months, they experienced over 300,000 aftershocks, the strongest one being 6.4. And the deaths that were recorded is over 56,000, over 118,000 were injured, and approximately 200,000 buildings were destroyed. So in the province of 80, that's where the site is located. 42% of those buildings that were destroyed were residential and 40% non-residential. And around 18 million persons were affected. And there were like other secondary effects of the earthquake, that is over 3,500 landslide and different fires across the city, including the one at the port. And I think it's important to mention something that, according to the Communications, Earth and Environment Journal, they describe it as a cascade hazard. So in Turkey's case, like that's the events that followed the major earthquake that amplify the damages caused by the earthquake. So the first one was a fire. The main focus of the fire was at the port. So there were a lot of structural damages caused by the fire, and the fire, it lasted about 4 days. And that's had a huge impact on getting relief to the city. In terms of landslides and flooding, so approximately a month after the earthquake, the province has experienced like 7 inches of rainfall, and prior to that, they have experienced a warm period of snow melts, which made the ground already saturated, and then the debris from those landslides caused rivers to overflow, claiming for a further 14 lives. Those persons were survivors of the earthquake, and as well causing further damages to roads and bridges. And another thing is to focus on, what impact. Another impact from the earthquake was like the mental health and wellness, especially in children. Approximately like 1 in 5 children are affected by the earthquake, and I guess, well, right now, like majority of the citizens, they're mainly relying on the Turkey Red Crescent just to get support to continue living their lives.
So I'm just going to talk a bit about why we selected our site location. So obviously the focus was the fact that it was a centralized location. We wanted it to be in an area where people could access it, but it wasn't too like far away from because we actually realized through our research that it's actually a very ungreen kind of city, and how we could kind of use those maximize spaces that hasn't got infrastructure on it. With this in mind, we chose this large park that it's kind of has these very much, it's quite an established kind of lots of established groves. It was a 25-minute walk from a major incident area. So it was quite accessible. It was very close to the port, but also a large amount of space that things like helicopters could land. It was close to lots of amenities. For us, like access was very key. So it had lots of big car park. So yeah, access was definitely key for us. And with that in mind, we kind of did a bit of a site analysis looking at things like the wind, the sea. Obviously, the port was destroyed. So maybe with this in mind, things like it might be brought in by air. But yeah, our focus was on the fact that it could be like an adaptable space. Obviously, this is something that we're thinking about, obviously for this area, but also how it could transfer across other cities. So yeah, so this was kind of how we picked our area.
Okay, so there's been this huge earthquake and all of these subsequent disasters in Iskenderun. So the research, so what comes next is usually disaster relief. And so what this research that you all at the University of South Florida have looked into is looking at these modular adaptive resource systems as being a really tapping into an untapped way to approach disaster relief. And so, shipping containers have existed for a little while in disaster relief and have been used a lot in terms of like housing. With Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, they use that as like post-disaster housing. In Syria, shipping containers have been used. They've put like schools into those shipping containers. And then also shipping containers have existed for a while in the sense of container farming. And so what this MARS system, or Modular Adaptive Resource System, is doing is really combining both of those things. And so in disasters, what people really need after is continuity and normalcy, and also food and shelter. And so what these MARS do is really help with help with 3 out of those 4 things. So continuity, normalcy, and with food. And so it provides food, a replenishable resource because it has these vertical farms inside of them. And so what I thought was really important from the research, a quote, was change in the agricultural landscape indicates a need to change the agricultural production. And so these container farms really do that. And so again, with the vertical farming, there may not be a lot of viable space to do agricultural production. And so inside of these container farms, you have, as has already been mentioned, can be a really large crop output in a relatively small space. And then again, there could be really quick turnaround in food production. And of course, there are challenges to instituting the system. There's obviously funding that needs to be available to build them or bring them in. There is obviously maintenance for the crops. It's still like something that needs to be cared for. And then there may need to be, or there does need to be like trained operators. But those challenges also provide an opportunity for involving the community. So, excuse me. So an example of that is there's a company called Vertical Farms that they specialize in the shipping container farms. And they have one that they did in Moldova, which is on the right-hand side of the column. And so they did involve the local community in like the building of the shipping container and then in the subsequent maintenance of the crops. Okay, moving on to our design ethos. So we're looking at 2 main phases. Phase 1, immediate aid relief that expand between 0 to 18 months, and phase 2, which is community, which will span between 18 months to 5 years and continuing after that. So each phase is broken down into two sub-phases. So the first 6 months, the main focus is on emergency or rapid development. So it's providing immediate fresh food, ensuring that the water is clean and fresh, and starting to engage community in taking up the space. And in the next 6 to 18 months, which would be another subphase in phase one is expanding food diversity, introducing other crops, building systems which we can start producing own plants instead of bringing in food to distribute, and starting soil remediation and seed banks starting to grow food. In phase two, in the next 1.5 to 3 years, we're just starting to expand build capacity, we'll start to engage, educate community and strengthen governance. And in that sense, just starting to get the community to take ownership of the space and reducing external dependencies. And in the latter 3 to 5 years, so at that stage, it will be a self-sustainable space. The community will know a full ownership of it. And I guess at this point, everyone will be comfortable to use the space. Everyone will know how to use it. And yes, just a space that will belong to the community itself.
Yeah, so when we were thinking about how can we create our own modular adaptive resource system, we started with, we have this research from University of South Florida and other just like precedent images. And so we're like, okay, shipping containers, but no, that's too boxy. That's kind of cold. Maybe it's sort of imposing, bringing this thing from like an outside person into this area. So we were thinking maybe we need to go more aesthetic and beautiful. Let's think about some more globular structures like a dome, or maybe we do like woven structures to add some like an organic feel or add more organic material to the structure. So we kind of slept on all of those ideas. And then coming back to this discussion, we kind of came to the conclusion that we needed to lead more into the practicality, because we had to think about, can it be transported? Probably will be coming in via ship, but maybe via truck. It needs to be durable. There was just an earthquake. There may be more, hopefully not, but it's still a possibility we have to think about. And then, just is it resilient in terms of all of these sort of environmental or outside factors? And so, yes, it is a container, but we were thinking, how can we make it modular and adaptive? So it's a container, but with these modular and adaptive parts. So there are these wings that are on the side of it that move in and out depending on if we're kind of like exposing them to the outside sun, air environment. And the container is the hydroponic farming container. And so these wings, the wings themselves go in and out, and then it has these panels alongside of it that have vertical farming, and it has the plants listed on them that we'll go into later. And those also move. You can think about it like a sunshade, I guess, or a fan or something.
Wow, that's interesting. I want to see more.
So we've gone with a nutrient film technique for our hydroponics. And obviously it's soil-free, the flow of nutrient with which rich water flows along the sloped grow channels. And the ideal crops are obviously to start with leafy greens and herbs. And herbs which are central to the Turkish culture as well, and their food, which is such a big important part, and their spices, they love their spices. It allows for basically high quality produce year round, especially in the Mediterranean environment. You've got great growing conditions. We also want to make the most of that by actually having it open, our system open to the environment. We want to support traditional diets basically, and sustainability in urban spaces, especially in response to disasters.
So moving on from those kind of spaces, this is more like phase two. Well, it's initial phase one, which was what can our community space be and how can we kind of bring the community rather than just having these shipping containers. And we looked at these yurts. They're a very traditional kind of structure in and around Turkey, and we were kind of inspired by that shape. So we thought, and also the practicality of it and the fact that it can be constructed. So our initial phase one was these kind of yurt that is in the centre of our space. And then we want it to be, again, this kind of adaptable system that it changes and evolves from this. And so into phase 2, we thought maybe how could this become more of a permanent structure? Well, while still retaining that beautiful shape. So we were looking at kind of precedent images and then sketching these kind of these spaces with kind of lots of glass, solar panels, spaces that people kind of want to go to, because they'll still be living at phase 1. It'll all be kind of still in tents, but from phase 2, they'll be moving more into their homes and hopefully back into kind of a bit more normal life. So we want this idea of gathering and interacting. And then this wicking, we were inspired by this kind of structure. So the image there kind of shows the overall layout that we were thinking, where the community hub's in the center and these containers go around the edge. And then we have wicking beds, which is a sub-irrigation for water. It's the most water efficient. So plants draw water up from the water below and into the soil and the plants. So it's a simple design, it's very cost effective, and it's the perfect for a sustained natural response. So especially in a Mediterranean climate, which can be very warm. And with that, we were thinking about how kind of the types of planting that we want, something that's a bit more established, we were very specific about the food, like Angus was saying, where we wanted it to focus on actually what they ate and what they consumed. So it was a focus on things that they actually will eat, like aubergines and olives. And these are obviously long-term goals, but we want the space to feel like it's changing and adding to the community.
Okay, so just to finish, there's like some visuals here of the actual space and how it would work like in that, and with a plan of that. What I would like to say, there was lots of talk about what it should be and how should it be addressed, and obviously this is a very sort of a difficult sort of place to be. And I this summer, not knowing that I was going to do that, I was in Greece for 3 weeks, and I met someone actually that wrote a book about a similar event that happened in Greece, and then she describes it just before and after. And something that she said that was very important about her research before writing the book was that when all happened, people just run to the streets, and there was nothing around. The buildings were gone, the streets were gone, the schools were gone, so people didn't know how to walk in this space, how to use it. So they would gather in places that they wouldn't in the past. So when we came to design this, we thought about this space, creating this space was like in this circle, sort of enclosed area, being in the community, being in the center of it. Somewhere that's secure, that they can find water, they can find some shade because it's a very hot sort of location, and that they can just develop a sense of community and taking their own hands the whole development of it. And that's what the image sort of represents, this the round with the containers around it, and then that center, the community in the center. And obviously we also have like a 3D model sort of showing the panels that's phase 2. So when people start taking from the containers into the planting, and then making into this sort of garden, sort of growing food areas, and maybe using these containers in a way that is reused and becomes center of studies or just part of the community for them to use, and so on. So I think that's that.
Yes.
Okay, any questions for this team? Go, Liz.
Hi. Awesome job, you guys. Again, I just wanted to say it resonated with me so much when you were describing the experience of, so we thought about shipping containers and then we were like, no, we'll do something round and it'll be this, and then slept on it and we're like, no, actually, yeah, shipping containers is good. That I resonate with that so much that sometimes, the ugly thing is a good idea, but you hate that it's ugly. So I love that you came back to shipping containers, but then we're like, we can still do something to improve that. That's really beautiful. I also really enjoyed that in a lot of ways, the two on Earth projects were the opposite of each other, that one represented sort of the circle and the other one the spokes. I thought that was really neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I thought this one was really good. The wings, to me, I thought about that. That makes a lot of sense to have that extra part especially if it becomes something permanent, where you can have growing inside, but also have these extra growing, wings to it. I don't know, but yeah, I think it was brilliant. And then of course, putting it in a circular type of configuration just creates a more expansive, modular, circular system, which I think it's brilliant. Thank you. This is great stuff.
And Vegas is holding up the model for you to see it.
I have to shout. Here you go.
It's a movable model.
Hello, camera.
Wow.
Here it is.
It's almost like that, reminds me of Transformers. You can transform the system. And so the idea, when I came up with the idea of MAR as a modular adaptive resource systems, I knew it had a possibility for expansion. And that's really what it's always been about, is how creative can we be as far as creating these systems? And I can see you guys have really put a lot of thought and energy and design into it, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, everyone. Our last group.
That's all of it fun.
Should we make a start? Okay, hello everybody. Well, thank you for sticking with us. We are the last team also looking at off-Earth solutions. So it's myself, Chris, Tom, Sarah, and Tanya, who will be speaking about our project just now. So everybody, please. Is it not changed?
Press the.
Amazing. Okay, so everybody please put your 3D glasses on now. We'll take you on another journey to the moon. I wish we'd done the whole thing 3D. Sadly not, only this part. So if you've got your 3D glasses on you, this one will work. The other ones not. But in responding to the brief, we, as the other group set out, we undertook a desktop study, which we'll present first, and that set out to try to understand the physical environment of the moon, needs of future colony, technology already available that might deliver some of these off-Earth solutions, and how modular adaptive resource systems can offer more than food security. And the concept development in the second part really then digs into proposed ideas responding to this brief in the short and longer term, so food provision for a moon colony in short and longer term. So luckily, going last, in some ways, the lunar environment's already been very well set out by our colleagues in Florida and by the other group. So just to very quickly summarize, the moon is difficult. It's very hot, it's very cold, the temperature swings, water is limited, you're very exposed to space weather, and there are very limited useful resources. Making the best of this, and this is just a summary of lots of things that went into our written presentation, we based this concept proposal on the characteristic assessment of the southern pole of the moon. The reason for this, following this very detailed evidence-based assessment of the lunar surface for short and longer term missions, heavily inspired by the Artemis program, which I know our colleagues also spoke about, which is NASA's ongoing program for collaboratively exploring the moon. They have marked all of their candidate regions in the South Pole. You can see the quote at the top here. I know it's a little bit small, apologies, but the lunar South Pole is the main candidate region here because it is accessible. It will be possible to land things safely. There's favorable terrain. You can stay in communication with Earth. It's relatively lit, which is of course kind of important for humans and for anything that we might want to grow there if we want to do that not completely artificially. There are resources as much as possible. So water and other resources in the form of ice, water, other resources might be available there. And we haven't explored it very much. So it's exciting. It's not a place that we've been to on the moon. And so, as I said, the Artemis mission is very keen to land here. There are 13 possible sites, all that look a bit like this in the visuals at the bottom. But the site that we have proposed our concept into is kind of an amalgamated view of these. There's no one, so we've just done a sort of generalized one of this. So I think
we can't backstep, so you're okay to do that.
Well, I mean, we could,
yeah, we could do
apologies, we did a little bit of a, there we go, and then we'll quickly back. So just quickly, the precedent images that we looked to for this. So we looked at precedent images to inform the structural, architectural, general design, planting ideas, planting concepts, and existing examples of food tech on the moon or in kind of analogous circumstances. The few examples that you can see here are architectural ones. So again, as you can see a little bit in the text here, we looked at structural forms that would need minimal materials for their use, whilst allowing a range of different modular construction types like geodesic domes, integrating structural and shielding properties of the landscape, so things like caves and lava tubes that might be integrated into structures. Thinking about structural forms on Earth, so the images across the middle panel here, both contemporary and traditional, which use local resources to help build structures that can regulate and respond to immediate conditions, so particularly in high environments with high temperature, limited water, and ones which have significant temperature swings, so looking at architecture that already exists. And at the very bottom, exploring the ways in which creatives have thought about what architectures in spaces analogous to the moon might look like in fictional imaginings. So one of these is from Dune and one is from Star Wars, but thinking about the ways in which actually we have thought creatively about this as well.
All right,
Thank you.
I'll look back.
Oh no, this one. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about the social and emotional aspect in our project. So basically living on the moon is a challenge because there are two main types of stress factors that there are two types of stress factors that we need to think about that. The first one is the psychological stress due to the isolation, because the people is going to live in the moon, so it's very hard for them. Also, we have to think about the mental fatigue, and at the same time, we have to think about all these people is going to live in small spaces, and that's something that is very hard for them. Also, we have to think about the environmental stress due to the extreme temperature, due to the radiation, yeah? And then to keep the people safe and healthy, yeah, life on the moon should have things like daily exercise to prevent bone and muscle loss, good food and nutrition to stay strong and motivated, busy daily schedules to stay active and focused, yeah, private spaces to relax, social interaction and technology to stay connected with others, and growing plants and vegetables which help people feel closer to the nature. And that's why our proposal is based on modular and adaptive systems, yeah, that support food production and community well-being. Therefore, this system includes things like light and color control, yeah, to improve the sleep and the mood, green areas and design to make people feel happy, yeah, common spaces that reduce the anxiety, which is very important as well, and personalized spaces that give people a sense of control and comfort. Yeah, that's
nice. So looking at a sort of a concept and form, so we started off by looking at the surface of the moon, you know, what have we got to work with? Okay, well, we've got a lot of craters of varying sizes. So the first idea was to look at putting an inflatable dome over an existing crater. And then of course by either humans or plants living sort of underground almost, you're sort of protecting yourself from the worst of radiation and temperature fluctuations. And then for our sort of precedent analysis, we came across a design company called, I think it's Hassel, but they basically came up with an idea in a design competition for a sort of 3D layered printed sort of, how would you describe it, like sort of topographical shaped protective structure, which is made out of a mine from lunar regolith, which is lunar soil. And of course, what this does is it provides a radioactive barrier against or protection for people below, but it also, you're then utilizing material on Earth and you're not having to take a step up, which obviously we know is incredibly carbon intensive and expensive. So we've gone with the idea of a sort of a 3D printed protection layer over the top, and then of course for the sort of habitable space underneath, we looked at the idea of inflatable pods. So again, we want to minimize what we're taking up there. So the idea with these inflatable pods is that they could be, I mean, it's modular, so they can be any size that you want it to be. In the first instance, we're probably looking at one singular pod, but we can scale it after that. And of course, you can, if it's an inflatable pod, you could almost vacuum pack it, take it up, doesn't really occupy any space, and then just inflate it, once you're up there. We did look at other options just quickly as an alternative to inflatable pods. We looked at, could you almost do some sort of like tensile fabric structure, sort of fixed extended side of the sort of the regolith shield, or I mean, we even looked at more conventional methods. So again, still using regolith as a material, but sort of forming it into blocks like you might build on Earth. But that kind of throws up a lot of issues with, obviously, when you're working in an environment that has like, is it 1/6 gravity that we've got on Earth? That throws up a lot of issues. So we just decided we stick with the inflatable pods. And then once we looked at that, obviously looking at sort of plan. So this is the sort of image on the right is a slightly more, this is probably where we see the sort of the concept in 5-10 years down the line. So this is a more developed plan, if you like, with like a sort of central dome, which we see being a sort of communal exercise, sort of social space. And then you sort of have your ancillary pods around the outside. So for sort of private areas, like sleeping, kitchen, labs, that, garden rooms, all that sort of thing. And then the idea with this central pod is that it has a light well in the top, and you create in the middle, we have this sort of, we wanted to create like a landscape, but of course it's very difficult to create a landscape on the moon when if we're struggling to grow cress, we're definitely not going to be able to grow trees. So to create this sort of full-size landscape, so almost likening it to like a forest on Earth, we were looking at the potential possibility of building sort of tree structures out of sort of space rubbish or whatever, and then sort of plant it, like using a hydroponic system of planting sort of individual plants on the end of it. So it creates this sort of gives off an idea of sort of green therapy and sort of this immersive landscape. It's mostly made out of space rubbish. But yeah.
Yes. So our project is focused on efficiency and interaction. Yeah. Therefore, there are two main design ideas, as you can see in the picture. So we got two options. The first one is the center of the dome is used for gardening, while small modules around it are for sleeping, eating, and exercising. The option two is all the main activities happen in the middle of the dome. Yeah. And small private domes are used by families for more privacy and comfort. Yeah, so we were thinking about what would be the best option for the design of the project, but the conclusion is we have two options. The two options are very good for that because both of them work, especially if we want to change the functionality of each module. Any module it has a different option for the families. If you want to have the activities in the middle of the project, you have the option two. But if you want to think about have this type of activities, you can have it around about the center of the dome. So that's the idea of having this adaptive model, because it makes you, it lets you have this type of things. Yeah. What else? Okay. And both designs help for they move easily, they work together and stay socially connected, creating a healthier and more human environment on the moon.
So this is just a couple of 3Ds of our sort of developed concepts. So like I said before, this is probably 5-10 years down the line, but effectively, so it's a sectional 3D, so we're cutting through it slightly, but you've got a big 3D printed layered structure, which with a light well in the top. And then obviously underneath you've got your big central dome, which, like I say, is your sort of, we'll have your sort of forest in the middle there with your social exercise spaces around the outside, and then you've got all your little pods around the perimeter of that, which are your ancillary sort of spaces. And that's just a couple more 3Ds.
This is the interior view of the project, as you can see, where all the main activities happen in the center of the dome. Yeah, this is a picture where you can see where the people is having the activities. They are doing exercise, and there is a space for the vegetation. There is a space for this green area, and you can see also the domes for the private families. So this is like an interior view of that, basically. This is another interior view of that, where we have these systems for growing plants. Yeah.
So our analysis and concept regarding how to grow food on the moon also question, why to grow food on the moon to start with. And so we're looking at self-sufficiency. We're looking at depending less and less of food that's transported from Earth onto the moon. And we're also looking at the quality of the food, not only in terms of nutrition, but also in terms of what food can bring to us. I mean, food is culturally important, and it also needs to taste good, because that makes us happy, really. Growing food and growing plants in general offers also a connection to nature, which is very much in the center of our concept for this sort of central area. In terms of how and what to grow, we looked at processes like hydroponics and aeroponics, which have been mentioned here today already. We also thought it was quite important to have this sort of circular economy, purifying the water, making use of all the nutrients that we could. For example, mushrooms are really good for that, because mushrooms can grow on a substrate made from the waste that's produced on the base, such as, for example, cotton clothing. So that was quite good. We also looked at the potential of mushrooms to create alternative foods, alternative protein, for example, using microprotein products that could be manufactured sort of in situ in a lab. In terms of hydroponics, we've also mentioned here today algae and seaweed. Fish, we could potentially grow trout and catfish and tilapia. Edible insects, which were mentioned here today as well. And then in terms of greens, following on from experiments already done in the International Space Station, etc., we could add potentially some more species to the ones already tested. So there were quite good results for greens, green-leafed vegetables, some peppers, tomatoes, and radishes. And following on from that, we could grow strawberries, for example, as well. There's also, very importantly, herbs. Now, herbs are very important in terms of, health, but they could also potentially bring, cultural factors into it that would create sort of more well-being, aromatherapy, etc. And then we looked at how to grow these plants. So we could grow both food and also ornamental plants. And now, because we're looking at space, we also thought there's a lot of things in the last 60 years that have made their way onto Earth's orbit. And there was a huge effort onto doing that, but not so much of an effort on bringing those structures back. So at the moment, it is estimated that 28,000 fragments of satellites and rockets and everything are still orbiting around Earth. and that was a huge concern for us. So we thought we could make use of that, of the space debris, and find ways to harvest those, for example, with robots, etc., instead of bring materials from Earth to the moon. We would harvest materials already in space and create modular structures that would help us as sort of containers to grow food, for example. Now, there's a lot of different fragments in risk of collision with actual satellites. So it's really important to sort of clean up the space there. So we looked at green walls, for example, sort of different containers, cylinders, some sort of trays or drawers or tubes. And then I would like to develop a bit more this concept that Tom mentioned of the tree. So in the center of our central social space, we would have these trees, this forest, let's say, where we could create them from space debris, and say the trunk would be taking all the kind of energy, sort of electricity, water, nutrients, etc. And then the branches would, for example, contain little pots where the food could grow, where the plants could grow. Sorry, just to finish. So this is very beneficial. It provides, I think, our idea as well was to have green space pretty much everywhere, and green space pretty much everywhere, because it just contributes to well-being, and all these modular systems could be reconfigured.
So this is our model, with most of the space agencies seeing Mars as the moon as a launch pad to the rest of the solar system and beyond. We sort of wanted to think, what would long-term, maybe 100 years or more, look like, or could it look like? So quite a few planetary scientists have identified lava tubes and the larger craters, that if they were sealed from the top, the temperature would be about 17 degrees centigrade, and we're protected from all the radiation and temperature swings. So for us, it seemed like quite an interesting environment to explore. If you think with 100 years worth of science and technology as well, the applications we could have, we can make concrete from the regolith and glass. We could create this kind of environment where we see the habitat as primary. As landscape architects, we've tried to create a garden. As we mentioned, the mushrooms, the substrate they feed from, it can create not quite Earth-like, but a substrate we can grow in. And recycling human waste, the ick factor, we could create pockets which can be irrigated. At the bottom, there's a lake which we could have fish in, and then we could use aquaponics there to use the water to irrigate the plants. And also the pink light is quite optimum for intensive farming. So we've allowed some caves and things where we can do that, but we're really trying to create that feel like home, I guess. Yeah, because that concludes our presentation.
Right. Any? Are you going to hold the model? You can hold the model.
Yeah.
It's quite heavy, I'm guessing. Any questions for these guys? Yes, Liz.
Hi, you guys are so nice to me. Thank you so much. I'm very excited about the subsurface building. This is something I've been interested in for a long time, but it's complicated on Earth because of moisture, and it seems like maybe that's not something you guys would have to worry about so much on the moon. I am concerned though, because of where I've lived in the United States, and in Florida, we have a lot of concerns about going underground and having moisture. And now I'm on the west coast of the United States, which is lousy with earthquakes. So is earthquakes or moonquakes a concern for building underground structures or semi-underground structures?
The lava tubes are from previous sort of activity, but that's been gone for millions of years. Can you see the model? Yeah. So from what we researched, it seems very viable. Some of the lava tubes can be 1 kilometre across and similar in depth as well. You could have cities in there, and it's a ready-made environment that just needs. I mean, like it's all hypothetical. There's a lot of engineering, and I think you're right. Water management would be, and ventilation are a challenge, but it's free space really from when you turn up. And yeah, why it picked up our interest as something to explore.
Truly excellent. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the space debris reuse again as resources to build the inner structures and things like that. I think there's a lot of imagination and innovative thoughts, and particularly like these to build subsurface. Because I always think about you're going to build up top, there's danger of radiation and meteors and all these things that could destroy your structure. But if you kind of build under the surface, you got that protection and that natural geology to work with. So I think these are some brilliant concepts, and yeah, I like them. It's great stuff. Claire, we did it again.
Brilliant. Well done, everybody. I'm really proud of everything you've achieved. Thank you so much, Joseph and Liz, for presenting from the University of South Florida. Thank you to those who joined us online as well and for your questions. It's been another great collaboration, and I think it just kind of inspires great things from the students, especially the models. We're loving the models. So yeah, watch out for my Instagram. I'll be sharing pictures of the models on my journey home this evening. So.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, it'd be great to see some more pictures, and I would like to get a copy, of course, of this, the recording.
Yeah.
So we can put that on the website. Like I said, great collaboration. I'm really happy that we've been working together. It's very inspiring to work with your university and your talented students. Just keep up the good work, man, because I think it gives me great hope to see that we're like-minded and it's global. I'm sure there's a lot of students here and a lot of students there who can see the future as a better place, through these sustainability initiatives. And I think that's great that we're collaborating, because the more we work together, the more we can, build the future we want to see.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Joseph. Round of applause for everything.
See you next time. Bye-bye. Have a nice life.
Thank you.